Fill her up.
You're listening to the Gas Digital Network.
Good afternoon, Michael Malice here. Let that be your welcome for the next hour. We have with us someone who I'm becoming good friends with, and even better friends with, comic Dave Smith, who's part of the Legion of Skanks, whose stand-up special Libertas hit #1, host of part of The Problem. And what I want to talk to you about, which I'm sure you're interested in talking about, there's two aspects to this story. Elon Musk tweeted out yesterday, take the red pill. And there's the funny aspect. I want to talk about red pilling and, you know, how you consider that. And there's also the autistic screeching aspect where people use that term to mean, I'm going to vote for Mitch McConnell. Right? I'm red pilled. I vote for Mitch McConnell. Let me put my headphones on, actually, like a professional. I'm sure you saw that. And yeah. What was your reaction?
Well, I had seen previously to that clips of, I didn't watch the whole thing, but I saw clips of his appearance on Rogan, in which he was really saying some, what me and you might consider very basic things, but things that take some real courage to say now.
Can you give me examples of what they are?
Well, he was just breaking down very basics of economics and explaining that we need to open up and be producing in order to keep the standard of living that we're used to. And he was like, you can't just cut checks to people. If you want stuff has to be made. There's a whole process of making stuff. And the government printing money and sending money around isn't going to get that done. And he was really saying, we got to go open up the economy. And then I saw—
Wait, can I say one thing? It reminds me of, there was some, I feel like this is either in a movie or like one of those stories someone tells about their friend who's like a trust fund kid. And the chick, I'm sure it was a chick for obvious reasons, couldn't understand how she had run out of money in her bank account because she still had checks left.
Right.
But I think that really is this mentality. It's like, we're running out of money. You know, no one's paying their employees. Okay, we'll make more money.
Yes.
And logically, it's true. You can print as much money as you like. But people don't understand because they think of it, I guess, like a ruler, right? If I make 1 billion rulers, a foot will still be 12 inches. If I print an extra $1 trillion, that $1 worth of grapes will not be the same as the dollar's worth of grapes was a year prior.
And to me, this is what economists do at their best, is help people to think about what an economy actually is. And to, with even just like little thought experiments, like imagine I go to a poor third world country and I double the money supply. Have I made them any wealthier? Has anything meaningful happened? Well, no, because it's the exact same level of production is still going on. And even theoretically, if you were to double the money supply and divvy it out in exact proportion to what people have. So there's not even like damaging effects of inflation. It's just, you have double the money and things cost double or whatever, somewhere in that neighborhood. You've done nothing. You've essentially done nothing. And even things like this, you start to realize, and there's a lot of this, especially from Democrat voters right now, who seem to be like, whatever, it doesn't matter how long we stay closed. We can just put everybody on welfare and just pay for them. Yeah. And in an economy of this size, it is easy to feel that way because there is so much wealth out there. You're like, oh, whatever, I don't know, we'll cut checks.
Here's what I think the mentality is. I don't think it's exactly like what you're saying. I think the mentality is, if you have a short-term crisis and a long-term problem, you have to look at the short-term crisis, right? And I think as a rule, that's true. Like if I'm bit by a snake, but I also have the flu, let me take care of this snake bite.
Sure.
So their mentality is, it's objectively true. Well, actually, it's not objectively true anymore, but let's pretend that we're in this kind of pandemic that everyone's going to die, right? Like some kind of like a movie outbreak. You're not thinking about the Fed. You're not thinking about, you know, GDP in 2024. You're thinking, holy shit, it's 12 monkeys outbreak. Like we got to lock the shit down and worry about it tomorrow. But it's not outbreak. And tomorrow is really 24 hours away. And that when you're talking about even Manhattan, which is an island, if you're talking about, well, let's not worry about where food's coming from, we're not going to be here in 2021. There is not a year's worth of food in Manhattan.
Right. And we're getting to a point now, to use another analogy, which, somewhat flawed, but it's almost as if you've got some virus and the cure is some type of poison. And so you give yourself a little bit of poison, and maybe the idea is that this can cure the virus. But we have given ourselves so much poison that we're at the point of going like, whoa, we're going to be looking at 40 million people filing for unemployment insurance before this is over. This might be, you actually have to start going, oh, this might be worse than anything we could have had.
And what they don't talk about, also, they talk a lot about cultural issues, and especially with returns of minorities, things like that. 40 million, let's suppose we had the money. 40 million people out of work is going to have an enormous moral and psychic effect on a nation.
And
it can't not.
Yes, and it's very strange to have to explain this to left liberals.
Yes.
The thing, one of the things I've really noticed from the whole, COVID lockdown thing is that the liberal Democrats have really become the neo-reactionaries. They are just reactionary against Trump. And whatever he wants to do, they're on the other side of that, because it's very strange to have to explain to anyone who's even remotely left wing that poverty has negative externalities. I mean, hasn't this been your central theme forever? And that just abandoning concerns for the working class, and to write it off as like, oh, you just want a haircut, or you just care about the stock market or something like that. It's a very strange dynamic. They are true reactionaries in the fact that they stand for nothing except being against whatever Trump is for. And that does, I think, relate to the Elon Musk thing. I think this is what he's getting in trouble for, is that he's just not reacting against Donald Trump. But so I saw him say that stuff on Rogan. Then I saw he said a thing about opening up a factory, and that he was going to go there and work. And if they're going to arrest people, arrest me first. And then I saw the red pill tweet. So that was the context in which I, at least, kind of perceived that to be that he has been, to some degree in this moment, red pilled on the whole state of the response and people's attitudes.
I think he's also been red pilled in the sense that he sees how their tactics work. And when he steps out of line, there's a couple of tweets I had from a journalist, female journalist, who shut down her account. This was months ago, and I'm sure people can find it, where basically she had this whole, she was went after him on Twitter, not in an unfair way, but whatever. She just criticized him. Let's give her the benefit of the doubt. And he just replied, he's like, no, you're fucking wrong, and blah, 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 blah. The next day, or let's say within a week, I want to get it right. She goes, oh, I'm writing a piece on how Elon Musk's fans harass women online. Do you have any stories? So what's amazing is this is an example of how I use this as a great example of the difference between a bias and an agenda. A bias is I look at all the data. I'm going to have my perspective. You and I would look at any data and be like, it's probably the government's fault. We're going to go in there, like probably the cops, military, Fed, like that's going to be our prejudice. Absolutely. But an agenda, and they're going to be like, oh, it's probably the white nationalists, Republicans, who knows who their boogeymen are. An agenda is when you write the story first, and then you look for data to fill in the blanks. That is a very profoundly different perspective. And I'm sure he saw that. And I'm sure he's like, holy shit, she's doing this publicly. So not only is she not ashamed, I'm sure she doesn't perceive she's doing anything wrong. And I'm also sure her editors would have encouraged this because they're not perceiving it doing anything wrong. Like, this is the kind of piece of that all the time. Oh my God, Bernie Bros, Bernie Sanders. There's this movie called I Shot Andy Warhol, right? About Valerie Solanas, who was a loon. She wrote something called the Scum Manifesto. Scum stood for Society for Cutting Up Men. She was a really radical, like, kind of cartoon figure. And she went to the factory at Union Square and she shot Andy Warhol because she was, because he was taking too much control of her life. There was a movie about her with Lily Tomlin playing her. And Billy Name, who was Andy Warhol's sidekick, sat down and was like, you want to attack masculinity and machismo, and who do you shoot? Andy Warhol? Like, this is your example of like a butch. Like, I'm gonna take on the man, fucking Andy Warhol, like the biggest queen of all time. But it's just so, anyway. So anyway, getting back to Elon and what you were saying.
Oh no, well, it's an interesting, dynamic, because you think of like being red pilled in this moment, and of course, as you were saying, it's not about voting for Mitch McConnell, or it's not about becoming a Republican. It's about realizing that this whole thing is bullshit, and that
Right.
like that's the essence of the red pill, right? Is going, oh, this whole thing is fucking fake. Like, none of this is real. And now I have the ability to see what's really going on, at least to some degree.
Yes.
And the example you brought up, the Bernie Sanders one, I was going really hard on the podcast about that, where I thought there was a tremendous opportunity, and we may not know for some time. We'll find out a little bit more in November about how red-pilled some of those Bernie Sanders supporters did actually get, because that was a really amazing moment when it looked like he was going to win the nomination, and all of a sudden Chuck Todd and Chris Matthews are comparing Bernie Sanders supporters to, wait for it, Nazis, because of course that's like their only weapon in the tool belt.
And also that Bernie, just getting earlier, is the symbol of macho masculinity who's too aggressive.
But yeah, right.
Of all people, this old man who, like, these two black ladies, he's a presidential candidate. Take the stage in 2016. He's like, oh, sorry, ma'am.
The guy who let two Black Lives Matter women take his microphone on stage, the guy who apologized to Elizabeth Warren for her attempting to slander him, is supposed to be some toxic masculinity
Patrick
embodied.
Bateman.
Yeah, like, that's right. And the closest a Jew has ever gotten to being president in the United States is supposed to be a Nazi takeover. It's so absurd on its face. But there was the thing that I thought was really interesting is that so many of the Bernie Sanders supporters types would be the first to complain about the Nazi problem in America post Charlottesville or the rise of Donald Trump or something like that. But I thought it was a really interesting moment for some of those kids, because a lot of them are kids, to realize that, hey, if you're a threat to power, you're a Nazi too.
Yes.
It's not
By
just
definition.
the rest of us. Yeah.
Yes.
That's actually what Nazi means to Chris Matthews and Chuck Todd.
Or sexist. I forget who, I use this quote all the time, and I forget who came up with it. It may have been the guys from VDare, but it may have been Peter Brimelow. But the definition of a racist is someone winning an argument with a progressive. And you see it, and that word has fallen a bit out of favor, because after Trump was being called racist every day and he won, I mean, oftentimes the cathedral can't learn from its mistakes, and they still trot that one out, but it's certainly less efficacious. And that's why they had to ramp it up now. You see the white supremacist, white nationalist being used
fascist,
constantly.
Nazi,
but
all those words.
Nazi it has historically been used in a looser sense, right? There are things that are like, okay, like a cop's a Nazi, like it means it's kind of authoritarianism, right? So you can see that. But specifically, like, white nationalist has a much more specific definition, and that's just bandied about for someone who's like, I don't want to spend trillions of dollars on a bailout. Oh, I'm a white nationalist. Like, wouldn't spending trillions of dollars like validate the white nationalist structure that you perceive as having? It's just really, and I think more people need to appreciate, and I harp on this on Twitter increasingly, how, and I think this is a source of frustration for many people, how many people perceive language emotionally. They're not using these words literally. So if you start arguing with them, oh, you're a white nationalist, you're not a white nationalist, you're not going to get anywhere, because they respond to the term by how it is making them feel. For example, if I said Dave is not as tall as I thought, that's not an insult, it's just a data thing, right? But if I say this band is overrated, they say, oh my God, you're saying they're terrible. I'm like, I'm just saying they're not as good as their reputation is. I had this happen over the weekend. I had this tweet, which I really enjoyed. I said, what's the song that get you out of a funk? And someone put California Dreamin', which is a great song. Although I think there's got a kind of sinister aspect to that song. And I just tweeted out, hey, Wilson Phillips' cover of it is pretty good. And some guy goes, no, you're wrong. The best cover is this. I go, when you saw me write, it's in writing. This isn't like, oh, it's a telephone. When you see me write pretty good, you perceive that as not only great, but the best. But we laugh, but this is actually very, very common. And it's something we have to all wrap our heads around if you're going to have communications. I'll just say one more point, then I want to hear your thoughts. I remember someone came up to Tom Woods, and in his bio on Twitter, after a very failed podcaster, it says, New York Times bestseller. And it's like, holy shit. It's you are not capable of perceiving language when it's in writing.
Yeah. Well, I think that's also particularly important to understand if you're talking to anyone on the left, because if you ever want to speak to them, you have to understand that this is how they perceive things. But it's also true to some degree talking to people on the right who are, like very nationalistic and, patriotic and praise the military, praise the cops and stuff like that. And this is why if you're going to persuade people, you have to position yourself in a way that you don't challenge their emotional interpretation of your words, but that you actually kind of make it clear that you're on their side. I've heard libertarians
into it. Yeah.
I'm sorry, is the video is real choppy for me?
Not for
is that
me.
A problem?
It's only on your angle. I'm having a fine time with your video.
Okay. All right. That's okay, fine. So like I hear a lot of times where libertarians, if they're trying to like defend the free market to left wingers, they'll have like concerns about racism or something like that. And they'll put it in a way where they're like, well, look, like it, in a free market, there's nothing wrong with inequality because some people work harder, some people make different choices, some people are smarter than other people. And, and you're like, okay, all a left winger just heard you say is that blacks are dumber and that's why they deserve less. Yeah. That's what they heard. Now,
and you're a phony because you're not even brave enough to say it. So you're a closet racist. So you're not. There's no even point talking to you because even at least a real racist would be honest enough to say it up front.
Yes, exactly. And you may not like that, and you may be like, "Hey, that's not what I said." But if you don't want to beat your head against the wall, and you want to actually get through to them, you have to speak in their emotional language, and you have to go like, "Look, slavery was the law of the land. Jim Crow was the law of the land. Mass incarceration is the law of the land." Like you can go through all this and be like, tell me what has fucked over black people throughout American history more than the state. And if you phrase it that way, now you're speaking to their emotional language, to their, like, you're like, no, listen, you can keep your identity and be on my team. Like you don't have to abandon your identity. And there's tactics like this that you can use with the left and the right, because I actually think the vast majority of people perceive these things emotionally.
It's not at all exclusive to one tribe. It's easier to one tribe because that's the predominant culture, is this kind of center leftism. So they're never going to have to deal with the kind of other side, whereas someone who's center right is going to have to navigate in like a world where CNN is the default news program in airports. So they're going to have a little bit more empathy. But like, here's like the logical fallacy. Like if someone says to you, Hitler starved millions of people in Ukraine, and you say, no, that was Stalin. Why are you defending Hitler? Right? But this happened when we had our show, and I was saying, I don't think Biden did a sexually assault Tara Reade. I do believe him in this instance. Someone came at me on Twitter. They're like, oh, why are you defending Biden? I'm like, this isn't a defense of Biden. This is a defense of my perception of facts. And there was an organization called the Innocence Project. And their job is to use DNA to get people off of death row. And I met someone who worked there, and I suggested their slogan should be, not every rapist is a murderer, right? But it's a joke, but it's also kind of tongue in cheek. It's like, just because someone is a bad person does not mean that they are guilty of every bad thing that you ascribe to them. And it also doesn't mean, well, we shouldn't try to defend them when they're falsely accused. You're in a lot better position when you defend someone who's falsely accused, who's your enemy, because then when you go after him for something that they really did do, you are perceived correctly as being more objective and fair.
Yeah. And in a similar kind of vein, if you accuse everyone who has any concerns about, say, the number of immigrants that come into our country as being a Nazi, then you've really run out of ammo when you come across a real Nazi who you actually want to use that term for. And to the point that you made earlier, I think that's exactly what happened. Basically, was for maybe 30 years, the term racist was used for anyone winning an argument with a progressive, or anyone who posed a threat of potentially winning an argument with a progressive. And after a while, it just lost all of its sting. And so the truth is that what people wanted to accuse Donald Trump of was being racist. Now, Donald Trump, he's really more just politically incorrect, I think, than anything else. But there were definitely some comments that he's made that were kind of like, you could fairly call that racist. The one that really stuck out to me was when he criticized the Mexican judge, saying he couldn't be impartial because he was Mexican. Now, whether or not you even agree with that, I mean, it's not the most outrageous claim ever. I mean, look, when you look at jury trials, jury selection.
Sotomayor, when she was running to be the Supreme Court, not running, but she was nominated, one of her quotes was, "A wise Latina is going to have a different perspective than an old white man," or whatever the end of the quote was. And she's not incorrect, and that's not necessarily a bad thing if you're going to have a diverse country.
That's true, but it's also debatably racist.
Sure.
But again, like what the example I was just going to use is like in a jury selection. If you have a black defendant you're representing, you try to get as many black people on the jury as possible. This is standard. Everyone does this. So there is some truth to people of different, racial or ethnic backgrounds bringing in some, biases with them, whether for good or bad, which it could be either. Like the OJ case is a good example, in my opinion, of bad bias, but there also could be cases where they're like, no, they kind of get what cops do to black people and stuff like that. So, but Donald Trump, there was nothing Hitlerian about Donald Trump's rise in 2016, but the term racist was used on Mitt Romney, my boy. And sexist, when Mitt Romney was basically on his hands and knees going, "I asked for binders full of women. I just wanted women." And they went, "Did you just call us binders full of women?" And then you have Trump, who's like, "She's a fat pig." So what are you going to do? Call him the same thing you called Romney? Well, no, it's got to be a level above. It's got to be Hitler, Nazi, fascist, something. And so that's where we're at now. And now you're starting to see that lose its potency, because they call, they're calling Bernie Sanders supporters Nazis. So that's real potential for a red pill.
Yeah, see, it's ridiculous to call them Nazis and pro-Hitler when they're actually communists and pro-Stalin.
Yes, really. Get your
Come on, people.
Straight.
Learn a book.
They're freaking democratic national socialists.
Yeah.
Very different.
One of the things. Oh my God. So there's some. You've been much more on top of Libertarian Party politics than I have. And there's a pair of tweets that my buddy sent me that I put up, that I just retweeted without comment on Twitter, and I would love to hear your perspective on this. Some guy was saying how, and he's not a name. He's got like 300 followers or something. I'm wondering if this is emblematic of something broader, where he goes, "There's a lot of people who call themselves libertarians who aren't," meaning like these white nationalists, these ANCAPs, blah blah blah. And he's like, I'm like a left libertarian. I believe in military, police, and having a regressive income tax to help poor people. And
a progressive income tax.
A regressive, basically like you get money when you're under a certain amount, like, or regressive, kind of like a Andrew Yang thing.
negative income tax.
Or negative income, and education and healthcare. And it's like, how your views are like doctrinaire, like democratic views. Are there more of these people in the Libertarian Party, and how are they perceiving themselves to be libertarians?
So from my experience, those people in the Libertarian Party are greatly outnumbered by people who we would consider more libertarian than them. I mean, there's like a libertarian socialist caucus in the party, but it's like 12 people.
Okay.
Like nobody is, the truth is that what there's a lot more of in the party at the kind of upper echelons, like in the established positions in the party, is just very blue-pilled, very risk-adverse, minarchists. That's what from my experience. On the grassroots level of the party, there's a lot of very passionate ANCAP radical libertarians, and like Michael Heiss, who is a really, really great guy. He runs the Mises caucus in the Libertarian Party, and their caucus has the most energy by far. Okay. There's a lot more people who like are down with Mises, hardcore Austrian economics and stuff like that, than there are of those guys, at least from my experience.
Well, I'm sure you saw that your other favorite Republican, Justin Amash, he said he's not seeking the Libertarian nomination, which is odd because it seemed like it would be his for the taking. And it seems like his career in politics, he doesn't have that many options open to him. Are you surprised that he didn't seek the nomination? And do you disagree that if he sought it, he'd get it handed to him on a silver platter?
I'm very surprised the way it unfolded. I think this is the first time in modern political history that an exploratory committee was actually an exploratory committee. Like that always means I'm running for president. Yeah. But he was actually just exploring the idea and then was like, oh, nope, I don't think so. I don't think it would have been his on a silver platter. I think that, there's a lot of crazy shit going on in the LP right now because it looks like they can't have their convention. Right. And so the delegates can't get together and actually vote. I'm not sure how it's going to go down. So if the people I was talking about, like the people in control of the party, were able to just pick, probably they'd give it to Justin Amash. But if it wasn't that, he was going to have a really tough time. There's a whole lot of people in that party who were really disgusted over the Bill Weld, Gary Johnson fiasco, who are really like, we want to run actually a pure libertarian. Because, they had this moment in 2016 where they had this huge opportunity. They got national exposure like they never have before, and they got more votes than the Libertarian Party has ever gotten before. And they have nothing to show for it. Nothing. It got them absolutely nothing. The Liberty Movement didn't benefit from Gary Johnson, Bill Weld at all. The Libertarian Party didn't benefit. The number of dues-paying members went down after 2016. The people didn't even stick around. They got millions of people to vote for Gary Johnson, Bill Weld, and they didn't even give libertarianism a second look because really, that's not what they were running on. Right. What they were running on was, Trump is terrible. And Hillary Clinton's not great either. Not as terrible as Trump, but how about a couple of Republican governors from blue states who are kind of, let's meet in the middle and go back to normal. And that was not the temperature of 2016. No one wanted that. So they got some protest votes, but they didn't convert anyone to being a libertarian.
Hey guys, Michael Malice here. Want to tell you about Beachbody. So Beachbody is a great program. You're going to get a free trial. Free. If you just go to text Malice to 303030, you get a free trial membership. What it does is it's all sorts of workout programs that you could do at home. So they've got the Zumba, yoga, cardio, weight training. This is what I did. Find the trainer that looks like the body you want. Look at what workouts they have. They'll have ways to show you the movements. And this is a way to keep exercising innovative and something you could go back to with a minimum of willpower. I swear by exercising as a means for mental health, because if you are feeling down or depressed or anxious, you can tell your brain, truthfully, I'm a better person than yesterday just because I put in 20 minutes of work, and Beachbody can help you do that. All you have to do is text Malice to 303030 and you'll have a free trial membership. Let's get back to the show. Wow. Okay. So who is in the running at this point?
Well, it's at this point, it looks like it's a race between, so there's Judge Jim Gray, who was a judge for a long time. He was like a guy who came out as a sitting judge in like the early 90s, came out for pot legalization. Okay. and he's running, and Larry Sharp is running with him as
Oh,
his VP.
okay. Why is Larry
So-
Sharp the VP? Larry has a much bigger name.
Yeah, but this guy's been
He's
a
black.
judge. Well, listen, you'd have to ask Larry, but he really likes Judge Jim Gray, so he's running with him. There's Jacob Hornberger,
Right.
who's the guy who I'm supporting, who's he's been around the libertarian game for a long time. He's a lawyer,
Yep.
and has been writing about libertarianism just for forever. And there's Adam Kokesh, who's, a pretty well-known ANCAP, who used to have a show on RT, was like a military guy who went to Iraq and then became very anti-war. And then there's Vernon Supreme, who wears a boot on his head.
Did you say Vernon?
I think that's his name.
Vermin.
Vermin. I'm sorry. Vermin Supreme. And
Vernon Supreme.
Vernon Supreme. Freudian slip, if you will.
How's
And
that Freudian?
I don't understand anything about that guy, and I don't know. I don't get it.
Hey Vern, we're getting on the Fed, Vern. So who does the establishment want?
Of this group, I'd have to think Judge Jim Gray is the guy who the establishment wants, because he's a judge. He's not too radical. I think they probably think he's the guy. That'd be my guess.
And if he's got a vice presidential running mate already, that means he's got some planning underway. So do you know when do we not even know what the process is going to be?
I think they had a meeting the other day to figure it out, but I have not been paying attention to what it is. But they should select their nominees in the next few weeks.
Oh, that's soon.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, because the Democratic convention's they bumped it to August. Yeah. So they're going to have a lot of time, these other parties to go up against. So I engaged in some silent autistic screeching yesterday, because after Elon Musk said, take the red pill, Ivanka Trump said, like, already taken or something like that, or I took it. I forget what she said. And I'm sitting there, I'm like, God, no. It reminded me of when I was in college, and my girlfriend at the time, her roommate, was reading Atlas Shrugged, and she's like, oh, I want you to talk about it with her. And I'm like, I know it's going to make me hate her. Right. And she had another friend who's like, oh yeah, I love the Fountainhead. Now no one tells me what to do. And it's like, oh God, please just put a bullet in me right now. I can't handle this at all. On the other hand, then I'm like, wait a minute. If Ivanka Trump is at that level of government, maybe it's possible that by definition, when you're at that level of government, you're red-pilled. Like, if you're part of the matrix, but you're the one making the matrix, technically, I guess you are red-pilled. I mean, she sure has a lot more insight in how this shit works than you or I do.
Yeah, no, that's for sure. You're definitely not blue-pilled.
Yeah, but that's the question, right? Like, do you think Ivanka Trump is red-pilled?
Quite possibly. I mean, she is at that, because by working with your definition, that you could be red-pilled and be one of the bad guys too. Yeah, so right? That's possible. But I think that my guess in this situation is that she is associating being red-pilled with, vote Republican. I'm red-pilled on how the Democrats aren't who they claim to be. Oh, so God. Vote Republican. I know. That's my guess.
That's the worst, most basic bitch definition. There was an article today in Washington Examiner, and I just went and got into it with the author. It was really fun. I love when people come for me and I could just let's nuke them from space. And she had this tweet about the term red pill originally, in its very worst sense, was used by sexist men who were sick of treating women like women and decided to use them as chess pieces. And now Elon Musk, and I'm sitting there, and now it's come to use any sort of reactionary contrarianism. Remember, you and I were just talking about contrarianism last week, and I'm like, holy shit, I don't even know where to fucking start with this one tweet. And then I replied, I go, when a journalist tries to explain a non-cathedral concept, it's just intellectual carnage. And she's like, that feel when you haven't read the article. And I go, I read this morning, receipts. And I had I went my history in my browser to show her that I had in fact fucking read it hours ago. It is I hate it when terms that are specific and are used for useful concepts reach the general population and become lose their complete definition at all and become emotionally used. And just red pill, to have it be used. First of all, the idea that game theory, like pickup artist theory, is about sexism, as opposed to people who do not know how to communicate. Men are better than, sorry, was that? Men are from Mars, women are from Venus. That is game theory. That is saying men and women communicate differently, and here are the techniques that you need to use in order to get what you want in a relationship. A lot of game theory is like that. It's like, these are the women's incentives. This is how their mental wiring is. This is how to respond to that. And it's not just about getting laid. It's about getting relationships as well, which many young men, historically, their dads are the ones who told them that. Now that's less of a thing, and they don't have those techniques, and they end up being very, very frustrated. And at the same time, it's supposed to be hilarious that these young, low status males can't get laid. In any other circumstance, when powerless people are feeling frustrated, it's a source of sympathy or empathy. But in this case, ha ha ha, like, let's just twist the knife at these fucking losers. It's just absolutely amazing.
And it is I sometimes I hesitate to use this term because I've had some people say, and somewhat correctly so, it can give like false impressions, but the term I was going to use is cultural Marxism, because it's not, I don't want to give the impression that I believe that the Frankfurt School runs the world and took everything over, and like it's, and then there's also a whole bunch of like racial shit that's like, thought like it's the Jews are running everything or something, but there really is this thing that is developed. It's the cultural version of economic Marxism, where the white, men are, it's like the intersectionality shit, that like the men are the oppressors, women are the oppressed, whites are the oppressors, blacks are oppressed, a black woman is more oppressed than a black man, a trans black woman is more oppressed, that, and this, and there
depends on which kind of trans.
Well, yeah, I guess so. I don't even know. I've lost count of how it works.
Maybe it depends, yeah.
But it's really, really stupid and unnuanced. And the truth is that if you're going to talk about like power dynamics, the power that women have over men in terms of like dating and stuff like that from a very young age is something that every single man and every single woman is aware of. It's there's everybody knows this, but that anything that goes against the kind of intersectional rules has to be discarded in the same way that like, Asian success in America has to be, like basically just thrown through. Yeah. You can't like really talk about that. Something like Nigerian success in America, you can't really look at that either, because that kind of disproves the whole thing when the blackest, of the blacks are actually doing really well in America. You can't look at that because that kind of disproves the whole we live in a racist society thing. And number one, it's kind of, it's stupid, but it's also just so damaging, because like in all of these areas, if you actually wanted to help and make a difference, you would want to look at these areas where, you know what I mean, that like either it contradicts the narrative, or you could maybe learn from what Asian Americans are doing and how they're becoming so successful, or Jewish Americans or Nigerian Americans. And in this example, because the truth is that men and women aren't pitted against each other in a competition, that we are friends and allies and husbands and wives and boyfriends and girlfriends. If there are a bunch of men who are lonely and unable to, like meet people, that doesn't help anybody. Right. That doesn't mean women win. Like how does it, what is the win for society if there's a bunch of disgruntled, lonely, unhappy men?
Right. One of the memes that I'm proudest of making, which is a statement I should delete from my consciousness and never say again, is Morpheus with the two one red pill, one blue pill, and on the left, and it was amazing because when I found the two pictures that go with it, they just happened to be colored correctly to the pills. It was Brian Stelter in front of his screen on CNN, and he had a chart of Trump's misspellings. And by the way, like, I cannot wrap my head around the difference between a chart and a graph, and every time I have to like guess, like I fucked that up. And on the right, it was a photo I found of Amy Rohrbach with, in the bubble over her head, was Jeffrey Epstein, and how she, she knew about it. They all knew, they hid it. She didn't even feel bad that she knew. She was just bad that she couldn't break the story. And it's like, and I put those up side by side, And it's amazing some people, as long as the word Trump is there, that this is about Trump. Whereas the broader point, and because they're so blue pill, everything must be about Trump. Only an idiot would think something's not about Trump. Whereas the broader point, of course, is like you were saying, this is all bullshit. Which is a bigger concern? Let's take your case for an example at face value. There's a jackass moron president who is illiterate. Okay, fine. Or there's a proof, well known, that there's an international sex trafficking ring. Let's even pretend they're adults. That prominent people in power are using, possibly being blackmailed by this guy. The corporate press knew about it, hid it, did not even, and even if they had to hide it, didn't tell the authorities, and made it out that if you were believing in this, you're a conspiracy theorist lunatic. Yes. And these two things are being presented to us simultaneously. It is, and so that just goes to your point about how that red pill is like, this is all, the Trump thing, this is such a sideshow.
Yeah. Well, and right. So, I mean, that's like, just perfect. That's like one of the best memes I've ever heard of. I mean, that's like, look, on one hand you have, and this is not, hyperbole, you have a man who was attacking children, a very powerful man who was in bed with some of the most powerful human beings on the planet. And according to this reporter, she had the story locked and loaded, down pat, had everything about it.
On record.
And it was intentionally suppressed for the purpose of maintaining relationships with the royal family, being able to get the scoop on the wedding or whatever.
Hold on, I got to interrupt you. This is how they would make fun of Alex Jones.
Yes.
If I had an Alex Jones character in a movie, I would have that character say, well, there's an international pedophile ring, and they all know about it, except Queen Elizabeth got on the phone and she put a stop to it in America. And it's like, okay, Alex, like, yeah, the Queen is behind this conspiracy theory. But that is what happened.
That is exactly what happened. And on the other hand, you have, right, Trump's misspellings. And the thing that's really the crazy thing about the world we live in is that the fake news, which that term was originally used by the corporate press to try to, demonize the alternative news, they're the ones who give you this story. That's how you find it. It's like, oh, there's a leaked video. You find the shit from like people like in Project Veritas and things like that. That's where you get these groundbreaking stories. I did a podcast. One of the podcasts I'm most proud of ever doing was on New Year's, last New Year's. That was the last part of the problem of 2019. And I went over, Chuck Todd on Meet the Press did an entire episode on fake news and basically the state of the press. And it was all about, the fake news on the internet and all of this crazy stuff. And I did a whole podcast where I'd play his story and then I'd give my biggest stories of the year. And I was like, the biggest story of the years to me were the Mueller report, the IG report on the origins of the Mueller investigation. I said the one that got absolutely no attention at all, but was the whistleblower at the what's the organization called again? It's the organization with the proliferation of chemical weapons that basically came out and said that it was known at the time that Assad did not gas his own people. Wow. That this was like this evidence was completely doctored, and the counter evidence was suppressed. There was that, and then this story that you're talking about over at ABC, and then there were a few other I threw in, like them showing the gun range in Kentucky, and claiming this was Assad, and all of these the fake news of the corporate press. These were huge stories, and they were all complete bullshit. And it's just that's a real red pill for you.
Hey guys, Michael Malice here. I want to tell you about Ridge, which is a very cool minimal front pocket wallet that's designed to streamline what you carry every day. If you go to ridge.com/malice and use code malice in the description, you get 10% off and free shipping and free returns. So what is Ridge? I love it because they got started just like me on Kickstarter. It is 2 metal plates bound together by a durable elastic band, and it looks nothing like a traditional wallet. Comes in a bunch of different options: titanium, carbon fiber, and aluminum. And it really looks kind of sleek and awesome, over a dozen styles and colors. If you go to ridge.com/malice and use promo code malice, 10% off, free shipping and free returns. Just take a look at it. It's really, really fun, because if you got denim, it gives you good, nice, crisp fades. And if you got an interview, if you got a date, oh, what is that? It gives you a sense of personality and character, which every person listening to the show desperately and sorely needs. Ridge.com/malice for 10% off. Yeah, I'm just, I love that term so much. And I've been one of the people who's been popularizing it. So I feel like Ivanka Trump is adopting my child, and it's like, I'm going to raise him like a Trump. And I'm like, no, I don't, no, I don't want this. I don't know. I don't like this. I don't like this. I don't like this. I don't like this. I think it is very useful that when people like Elon Musk and people like Rose McGowan, who, does have a screw loose, let's be fair, when they see for themselves how overnight you can go from, oh my God, you're so cool, to an enemy, a public enemy. And it must be completely traumatic, especially for someone like Rose, who just how the violence with how the reaction changes and how quickly people respond to their cues from their overlords. And for a while, it must be confusing. And then you're like, oh, this is all inorganic. These people are following orders, and there are puppet masters who are the real villains in this picture. But I think it's a good thing where Elon Musk is not, so many people are tribal thinkers. Elon Musk is not associated with any political party. Rose McGowan, maybe as a creature of Hollywood and maybe as an ostensible feminist, you would think broadly Democrat, but she's not a partisan figure at all. She's not involved in Washington. She's not some big spokesperson. So when you see people like this pointing out to you just how, and realizing for themselves just how nefarious so many aspects of our culture are, that and to have it be on Rogan as opposed to fucking 2020 where it's going to be edited, it's also really amazing. We talk about, and I'm just realizing this as I'm speaking, we talk a lot about our soundbite culture and Twitter. You got to get ideas out in 5 seconds. The fact is, the most popular podcast on earth is interminable. It's 3 hours. Yeah. So you go on there on Rogan, you are going to be able to express your ideas nuanced and at length. And there are going to be plenty of people, certainly statistically enough, that they will be able to understand you and have their minds change and defend that perspective. And that is, oh, am I muted? Oh, that is an enormously useful tool going forward to fight their bullshit. I'm curious if you have any thoughts on that. Then I have another question.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that's the best part of the state that we're in right now. And with the thing like Rogan, I mean, and me and you have both experienced it because we've been on there several times and gotten, a lot of people listening to us now and following us now from that experience. And it's not like anything else. I mean, if you go, like, it's not an exaggeration. If you go on cable news, you might get 5 to 6 minutes to speak. If you go on some of these other shows, you'll maybe get a few minutes. And with Rogan, I mean, if you listen to me or you, one episode of Rogan, you come out knowing a lot about it. Like, if someone follows you after Rogan, that's not just even like, somebody who watched you do like an hour stand-up comedy special or something like that. It's just not the same thing. They've heard your thoughts for 3 hours in depth, given every angle. It's a beautiful thing that he's built.
Did you see Anderson Cooper losing his shit? And oh, you didn't see this. Okay.
No, I don't think so.
This was amazing. So CNN had a town hall about coronavirus. And on this panel, they had Catherine Sebelius, who was former Health and Human Services Secretary, I believe. They had some prominent doctor, and they had, in the words of Anderson Cooper, Greta Thunberg, because you can't pronounce it in the Americanized way because then you're, a racist savage. And they got in a lot of heat. They're like, why is this bitch here? Like, what the hell does she know about a virus? And he had to have this monologue addressing it. And he has this little smirk on his face because he's like, don't these people have something better to do? Doesn't Donald Trump Jr., shouldn't he be running his father's company, blah, blah, blah? And it's like, how long does it take to send off a tweet, dick?
Yeah.
You know, you fucking blue blood asshole. And to me, it reminds me a lot of Hillary when the server news broke and she had to give that press conference at the UN in front of Pablo Picasso's Guernica painting, and the rage and the fact that she did not want to be there. I don't blame her for not wanting to be there, but that she was basically being forced to address questions she had no interest in addressing. Which, even if, let's suppose if she didn't do anything wrong, I would also resent that I have to have this press conference and like answer, like, this is, this is all bullshit. Why do I have to address this? You know what I mean? Like, this is ridiculous. And I think this is a tipping point moment where it used to be that they could be above the fray and pretend this stuff doesn't exist. And now if they're being forced to break the fourth wall, that is not being done because they want to. That's being done because they have to. And I'm reminded very much of the wrestling scene in the 80s. I was a WWF fan. And there was another organization at the time, a rivalrous organization called NWA. Ric Flair was the big champion there. And the WWF pretended consistently that the NWA didn't exist. So if they would like get a guy from NWA to cross over, they wouldn't give any backstory. They would be like, oh, there's this great new wrestler. And like, if you only watched WWF and didn't like read the magazines or talk to your friends, you would think this person came out of nowhere, as opposed to they had been established for a long time with the NWA, like Marvel and DC. It was very bizarre. And that broke because, and my jaw actually dropped. Like, I remember it vividly. There was one week where my hero, Bobby Heenan, who was a wrestling manager, said, next week, I'm bringing over someone like blah, blah, blah. And he held up the NWA belt, and he said, Ric Flair. They got the champion of the other organization to come over, and they were acknowledging its existence for the first time as the consequence of building him up. And it was like, holy shit. So for me to have Anderson Cooper tell his audience, there's a lot of these assholes on Twitter, and here's why they're wrong. You are forcing to acknowledge that this social media shit exists and is getting to you.
Yeah, and you got to think. By the way, yeah, I remember that in Ric Flair, they would fuzz out the belt because they didn't have the rights to actually air the belt. But he would come on with this belt that was fuzzed out, and he'd say he's the real champion. Yeah, it was a cool storyline. Well, you got to think, right? This whole dynamic of the social media world is really new. It's really, really new. It didn't even really exist in the same way in 2012 that it exists now. Okay. Like, I mean, there was social media out there, but it was a lot newer. Twitter was not the place where you went to get news, where you went to get information. It was kind of seemed as like a silly thing. It was like, oh, you tweet, you what? Like, this is, like
brain
older
farts.
people. Yeah. People didn't understand what it was. By 2016, this is a major force. And all of these things where it's not, like we just mentioned, Joe Rogan. A lot of people are going to Joe Rogan to get information, and they'll sit there and have, whatever we think about some of the guests, but they'll have people on there who are really smart people for a 3-hour conversation on whatever, and then there's Crowder and Ben Shapiro and all of these different things that are not the corporate press that people are going to for their news. And then there's Twitter, where people are interacting with themselves. 2016 was really the first presidential election where all of this stuff was in play, and Trump won. And this is the first, they did not know how to handle this. And now in the years afterward, they're still trying with their decades long, tricks in this world. And it's not working nearly as well. And they do the same thing with that Hillary Clinton example you used. It's a sense of entitlement. It's a sense of like, I shouldn't even have to be addressing this. That nobody, no approved person decided I had to talk about this. This was the same. This happened with the Tara Reid thing. It was just so huge on social media that they had to start bringing this up. They couldn't pretend it doesn't exist anymore. This is a whole new dynamic. And one of the things that's really happened with this COVID situation is that, and there's certainly, it's easy to look around and see how many people just conform. right away.
Sure,
And
sure.
that's, you know, that's scary in itself. But it's a dynamic where people start to realize that they're not allowed to ask questions, and that they've just, you're expected to, you know, to embrace a new world, give up everything you knew about society, and you can't even question whether or not we need to do it. They're like furious at you for saying like, yeah, but maybe, I mean, didn't this one state not lock down, and it doesn't seem to be any worse there, so like what's really the problem? And that it is really it's a fun show to watch.
Speaking of fun shows, we're running out of time. What has been your favorite part of this episode?
My favorite part of this episode was you remembering to put your headphones back on.
We are all welcome.